welcome back to the Rangers News YouTube channel. My name is Cameron Willis and I'm joined once again in sunny Glasgow by Jordan Carlisle. The weekend after Rangers beat Cove Rangers to reach the fourth round of the Scottish Cup, where they have set up a tie with Celtic. We're going to look back at the last kind of week. We'll look back at the match. We'll look back at some of the bigger performances from it. But if you haven't already, please click like, please click subscribe, please help the channel grow and join in the conversation in the comments below as well. So yeah, we'll start with the Cove Rangers match, Jordan. I think there wasn't very many who spied an upset on the cards in this match. Although we did expect perhaps it to be more rotated, I think, in terms of the squad, but I think injuries hampered that. I think Jack Simpson and Bungani Zungu were scheduled to start, but had to pull out with a knock in the days running up to it. So yeah, Rangers, John McLaughlin got recalled, didn't have much to do. Started with quite a strong team. Hilander and Goldson at centre-back, Patterson, Bassey, Kamara came into the team, Arfield was in the team. It was a strong 11. But yeah, maybe the most exciting for fans was seeing Wright on the right and Jermaine Defoe up front. So yeah, game starts and I think Rangers imposed themselves well. But did you expect us to come out the traps like that? And was that a sign of how serious the team are taking the Scottish Cup this season?
Yeah, I think the comments about it being a priority would have maybe seemed a wee bit hollow if there'd been sort of a flatness about the game. And although there weren't major changes, you're still looking at, obviously McLaughlin coming in, he's not going to play a big role in terms of how the game shapes, but the two fullbacks both looking to make an impression, and then Wright and Defoe and Roof as well, who's obviously had the sending off and a few injuries and stuff recently. So there's enough freshness, I think, in the team to have a bit of an extra boost. And yeah, I thought Wright was the guy that sort of set the tone for that, though. I think when you have Stephen Davis in the middle, I was surprised that Davis playing, given how much he did over the international break. But again, there was sort of a slight shortage of options. But he can obviously pick out runs and stuff of players, and Wright was keen to get in behind early doors. But I don't think Cove helped themselves. I think they've done very well to sort of rise up through the leagues, and they're pushing for promotion stuff this season. But they kept a very, very high line at the start, which I think just invited people to get in behind, and then for the goals, the sort of insistence on playing out from the back. You would think that you'd be sort of drumming into the players before the game. Just once we get hold of it, yes, try and do a bit with the ball, but you need to get it out of the danger zone, and they didn't do that very well. So played into Rangers' hands, and I think it's just what Jared would have been after, getting goals fairly early doors and getting the sort of tie over with. But yeah, I don't think anyone really thought that there was much of a chance of this being an upset, and I think that's a mark of how good Rangers have been. Probably the Stranraer game last year, it was obviously at a different time sort of in the season because it's been delayed and all this year, but that was pretty lackluster last year, even though it was like debut for Patterson, debut for Kennedy and that sort of stuff. It wasn't a great performance against a similar level of opponent, but this was much more impressive, I think.
I'd say, I mean, them playing out for the bank and stuff and shooting themselves in the foot. A lot of people always say, "Oh, how brave of like a team that don't have the same quality to try and match you and stuff." And there is a level of kind of, I don't know, not stupidity. It's too strong a word, but I thought that they set themselves up for a pace, and then they spent the entire second half chasing shadows and trying not to get the scoreline worse. So, if anything, it just hampered the chances more than kind of improved them. But yeah, Rangers were very bright. You touched on Scott right there, and he was bright throughout. I think he was probably most Rangers fans' man of the match. It was good to see him because he's shown in flashes since he came into the team that he's got ability. He's not scared to get on the ball. He's not scared to get involved. But I think he's got real quality as well. And to me, he strikes me as somebody who is very excited about the move to Rangers and the opportunity that he's got here. And it's not something that he wants to see passing by. An exciting wee player. He's probably going to get a good bit of time throughout the course of the latter stage of the season, simply because we've got the league wrapped up in that. But is he someone that you're excited to see more of, and how big a role can he play next season, you think?
Yeah, I think it's one where, like most people, hadn't seen a huge amount of him before the move at the game, just before sort of the window or the real speculation at Aberdeen. He was impressive in that, but again, it's hard to sort of tell. We've had a couple of signings from Premiership clubs, especially guys that can play out wide, like Hasty and Greg Stewart and stuff like that. Guys who haven't really hit the heights that were maybe hoped for. Jordan Jones as well, but he's sort of come in and shown like a real hunger so far. He's spoken really well, shown a discipline that maybe some of the other, like maybe Jones, sort of early opportunity, he blew it that way. I think he's just really impressed people. People are absolutely raving about him from just 20-minute showings, just because he's got nice touch on him. He picks up decent positions and he's got pace, and people love to see that. Not just pace though, but an ability and like a willingness to take people on, which there's not a huge amount of that in the squad. It's one area that Rangers probably lacking in, because only really one winger with pace and take people on in Kent, and he plays every week, so it's a different dynamic to add to the team, and the potential for the two of them to play together, something that will really excite people. But I think he can play a big role going forward. Interesting to see Jared talking about how I think it's just the different levels when you talk about Aberdeen and Rangers. Like, he's 23, he's not 17, so he's been at Aberdeen for a while. But what Rangers have done is they've looked at him and just identified straight away, we need to get him bigger. We need to put some muscle on him. That's going to help his game, and then also let's do some dedicated work with him in the final third. You can see there's a slight issue there. It's a work on for him, that when he gets in the final third, that the decision making, or just that like a little bit of panache is lacking slightly. But it's got great balance and ability to go past players, and I just thought it was so good that he was popping up everywhere, and I think that's a key part of what Rangers and the coaching staff want to do. They want the forward players to be interchangeable, and he showed an ability to to run in behind, to run at people, to pick it up on the left, pick it up on the right, and make movements through the middle as well. So I thought it was really, really impressive. And it's one of those ones where a lot of times with the same guys like Greg Stewart, Jordan Jones, there's been calls for these guys to get more opportunities in the last couple of years. And then when they do get a start in a game where it sort of suits, it hasn't really come off. Whereas this one, 6-7 sub appearances in a row, everyone was like, right, that's this is nailed on, he's going to play. And for him to be the standout player in the pitch, I thought was really impressive.
He's enthusiastic, certainly, and I think that'll bode him well, at least in kind of Korean favour with the Rangers fans. But I know I'm excited to see him, but again, I think it's like a work in progress, and maybe the long-term idea would be to get like a kind of bargain replacement for a Kent, for example, in a season or so's time, should any interest materialise in the Premier League. And obviously that's happened before, and that would be interesting. And I think that if he continues to go in the direction that he's going, it's major kudos to like Gerrard and the recruitment team and Ross Wilson and all that for identifying him, because like you say, he was a player that obviously we didn't know all that much about before he joined Rangers, even though he's been quite consistent in the Aberdeen team. I think he had a loan spell at Dundee as well, and he did impress when we beat them in Pittodrie just before the interest became clear, like you said. But it's interesting that we've managed to identify this player that maybe somewhat went underneath the radar, and he's made a good start to his career, so hopefully it continues. But another kind of influential starter in the match was Jermaine Defoe, and obviously we were speaking last week about whether or not we would offer him a new contract, and I think there's a lot of doubts regarding that, but I don't think you can doubt his ability or how well he looks after himself, because Jesus, he looks so sharp coming on. Maybe just a wee inch off it, because he had a couple of kind of half chances, but the way he turns in the ball and stuff is really, really impressive. And he faces it up, he gets the space, and like Cove give him so much room, and he's got all day to pick it, and he hits an absolute beauty. I mean, anybody else scores that, and you're probably raving about it, but it just just second nature to Defoe, cuts it across. But yeah, what did you think of his performance? And do you think that he's kind of fighting his corner for a contract extension next season?
I think he's definitely eyeing it up and yeah, trying to. I think as an experienced pro and really respected guy, he's not coming out and being like, yes, I 100% want a new contract on the table here. Because it's clear that it hasn't been offered to him yet. And I'm sure he doesn't want to lose face that way, but he's very clear that he loves it at the club. He's been like that the whole way through. He was like that after the game on Sunday, and yeah, I don't think that's going to change. I think he wants something new. Whether he gets it or not, a different story. But I suppose as well, one thing that we didn't touch on with Wright is that it was really impressive. But again, it was against Cove, it was against a third tier team. So yeah, you're going to get more space, more opportunities, and also they were sort of helpful, especially in the first half. But yeah, I thought he was sharp. He obviously should have scored that one. It was really close in. It was fizzed across a little bit, but he normally gobbles those up. The actual goal itself was, yeah, really impressive as usual. His goal is just his general numbers. I think that's 30 now. He scored since a move, which no one could really have complained with.
I think it's a goal every 101 minutes.
Yeah, I mean it's excellent. It's an excellent return, and obviously,
if you're talking about getting back, are you going to be able to find a striker to give you that return, cost effectively, and who would accept a bit part role? I know Defoe says that he wants to play, and obviously at his age, it's probably better that he gets more minutes or games or whatever. But are you going to be able to get somebody who has that potency? It was interesting when you touched on the difference between the levels, because Defoe, more than any other player, I thought in the match, showed that experience that he knew that Rangers were a better team and he could find that space and there was no panic and there was a lot of control in his performance. Are you going to be able to find somebody who can offer that elsewhere for in the current situation? I imagine you might take a minor wage cut. I don't know, but again, I think his wage is super inflated in the press. I don't think it's realistic how much some are claiming that he gets paid. But yeah, are we going to be able to find that for the same amount of money?
I don't think you'll be able to, yeah, get a striker guarantees you more or less a goal every other game for cheap. But I'm also not sure if, given the amount of time he's played this year, if one is actually needed. So if you need a like for like replacement, because he's only played 500 minutes or something like that, two of his main. So there was that game, played 90 minutes in the League Cup as well against Falkirk. So that's a good chunk of the minutes that he's played out of the way in 2 cup games where realistically other people could have played. For that one, the weekend where else is in the stands. Itten is involved, but again, he's unlucky to miss out the starting 11. Does that actually affect him? Are these games where he should be playing in as well as someone with maybe more of a long-term future and stuff at the club? So I'm not sure you need a direct replacement. Obviously, things, it's a bit of a change from the way it was previously, because I thought it was ridiculous for a while when it was just Morelos and Lafferty. That there was no depth whatsoever to the options. Now there's a lot of depth in Ruth Morelos, Itten and Defoe, and other guys who can maybe fill in around there. So I'm just not sure there's a need for a direct replacement, and especially the wage sort of reports on it might be a bit inflated, but he's also not on buttons, based on his name and all that. So and what he's produced. So I just don't think, based on the minutes he's played, that they necessarily need a like for like replacement, and that's the issue. Like, do you offer another contract, which is probably still going to be relatively lucrative for a position, to fill a position that's not necessarily needed? I think that's probably more the question.
That's an interesting point. I think that's a big takeaway. But then again, would Rangers then say that they're going to be going into Champions League and a European campaign with one less striker, technically weakening the squad? I don't know what the thinking is, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with Defoe, because he's put an Instagram post with Union Jacks and all that on it, and try to get like the staunch points up to win a deal. So good luck to him, man. I wouldn't be against it, but I can understand the reasons why he might not get it either. But yeah, the next 2 goals were scored by obviously Kamal Roof. Who, it was good to see him looking sharp again. Thought the keeper probably could have done better with the first one. And the second one again, nice finish. he's a potent striker, isn't he? You know, he loves scoring goals and he knows where the back of the net is. And I think, do you think that's sometimes a wee bit underappreciated with him because he's maybe been put out left and stuff? But I think he's got a natural striking ability that maybe is a little bit undervalued. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think he's very sharp, yeah, in and around the box. A lot of his goals, I think it's 14 now, but a lot of his goals, obviously he scored the mental one from halfway and a bit of a stunner against Benfica as well. But other than that, a lot of the ones have been some inside the box, in and around the 6 yard box as well. And like
First touch one,
um
I feel he's good at them.
yeah, he's sharp. He took the second one just very comfortably, no celebrate, absolutely no shock that he stuck it away. As emphatically that he did. And yeah, I think so. The one thing for me is that if you're going to play two up front, I don't think he really fits that mold. We've sort of talked about that before. I don't think in terms of, yes, in and around the box, but when the ball's on the deck, but I don't think he really provides much of an aerial threat or as a target man in the way that Morelos can and can spin players and that sort of thing. So yeah, maybe he would a guy who could play through the middle if you play two up front, which is relatively rare these days, just at any club. Um, but yeah, you maybe lose something a little bit when he's out of it on the right, but also yeah, the team probably gains more than from Morelos being there and Roof still being on the pitch in some capacity. But yeah, he's also impressed with his goal return. That the other thing that you might factor into a Roof in terms of the depth thing is that you just can't rely on him to be fit. I think that's been proven that in this season. But obviously taking one season is too small sample size. But I mean, it's been a case at Leeds when he was there for multiple seasons, and when the transfer went through, it was like, good luck, you're getting a cracking player, but you need to keep him fit, and that's been the major issue for him. So I don't think you can rely on him to play 45 games a season. It's just not realistic, because he's going to pull up, tends to be the calf, doesn't it? But like Jack, so that's an interesting sort of dynamic as well. But when he's played, I think by and large he's done well. There was that one period, the longest part that he's been fit for. There's no coincidence, I don't think, was when he was playing his best games. But I think it was a good time for him to get minutes and get him off, as Jared said, for sort of bigger games to come. But it sounds like he's going to play a fairly big role in those games, which obviously the Jared's going to take very seriously.
I think him, Morelos, and Kent is still our strongest front three. I think that's the most potent that we've got, and even if he isn't playing up front, he's still influential. But yeah, he's a good finisher, and I think he's shown that since he's been at Rangers. And then the final goal scored by Nathan Patterson, who continues to impress absolutely everybody, and the conversation surrounding him took an interesting turn when Gerrard said after the match that I think it was obviously the headline making comment that Patterson's development could be hampered by this SFA ban. It's not the reason why Rangers have appealed it, but it was the kind of line that most garnished the headlines. But yeah, or gathered the headlines. But he continues to impress, and yesterday again so sharp. What a finish that was as well. Again, it's against League One opposition, so there's not as much pressure and stuff, and Rangers are expected to win. But he's so hungry, he's so eager to get on the ball, he's so athletic. He's a really, really, really good modern right back. I think Gerrard said that he could be one of the best ever in Scottish football history, which is very interesting when you consider Rangers' greatest ever transfer export was a right back. And Alan Hutton, I think we got £9 million from him, still hasn't been beaten. You compare it with Celtic, who had Kieran Tierney, obviously, who went to Arsenal. Is Patterson, you think, going by this continuing hype? And I mean, by the sound of Gerrard's comments, there's potential for him to be in that Euro squad when he said that Steve Clark would be disappointed and stuff. Is a potential, is he on the pathway to becoming a major Rangers asset and a major player for us?
Definitely, I think he's been so impressive, and yeah, it's against sort of League One opposition, but he's in there, in terms of the goal, as you said, like really hungry and just willing to pounce, and I think that's just a sign of being a better. He's just shown that he's at a better level. He's anticipating, he's ready, he sees the pattern of the fact that they're playing out from the back, that then by extension, being third tier players are not going to be as crisp in possession, and he was right on it in a flash. And yeah, really nice finish when it would have been easy for him to sort of stumble over it, being caught under his feet. But it was a really good finish. I thought it was interesting from Jared, considering that I think previously he'd been asked about Patterson before the last Scotland squad and was like, I'm sure he'll get there at some stage, but there's no pressure. To them being like, I think he's one of the best ever prospects, which is high praise. And like, we can sit here and talk about it how till we're blue in the face, but Stephen Gerrard knows more about players and about prospects than most other people in Britain do. And if he says that, then that's something you got to take really seriously as the sort of how high a standard this guy is. I don't really agree with the sort of narrative about the fact that the ban, could affect his career, because again, I think it's interesting that they're pointing to Jared was talking about people assume that it's the same as Edmondson and Jones. So obviously it's not quite the same as having a few people around, like deciding to, go to a party. There must be some sort of mitigating circumstances there.
I mean, to me, the way that I see it is, right, I think I'd maybe suggest this time, I don't have any insider information in that, but it's 5 players with like potentially 5 girlfriends in a setting which I don't think this is as rambunctious as Jordan Jones and George Edmondson going to a party with like 10 other random people who are all going back to separate bubbles and stuff. And it's with the general public. So from the outside looking in, I would have. I mean, to me, that looks like it's a different scenario. To like messing around with the general public. I don't think it's the same.
Yeah, I think that does seem at this point, like if he's coming out and saying that without giving actual details, that it is different. At the same time, though, I think it's clear that he was gonna. It's clear that he was going to get banned, and to go from saying, at the start it's unacceptable and let the club down and do all that, to then when the SFA come and actually give out the punishment, which, by the way, how long has this whole thing taken? Like, it's incredible. It's worked out well for Rangers and I think that's part of the appealing process, because like Tav's not fit yet, and that's the main thing. There's no actual.
That worry to you, like the fact that he's having these conversations in public. Does that worry you about Tav's injury and how long he might potentially be out for?
I don't know. There's obviously saying it's fairly positive at the minute.
You think that forms part of the decision making, or Rangers standalone, even if Tavernier was fit, do we be appealing this ban, or do you think that that's a major part of it?
Again, yeah, you don't actually really know, but I suspect it's certainly got something to do with it. Otherwise, it just seemed to me at the start it was very much an acceptance of that. We're not going to go into the details, but the players have made a mistake, and that they've been really seriously dealt with inside the club. So to me, it's unrealistic to expect that no action was going to follow, when obviously there is a precedent set. It's not as bad. The punishment isn't as severe as before. With Jones and Edmondson. So I definitely think there's a degree of that, and it makes sense to pursue it that way. Why would you leave yourself, if you've got the option to do it? Why would you leave yourself with no right backs when you can just pursue it the other way? But I don't really agree with the fact that he's one of the best young prospects ever. This could harm his career. I mean, he should have just stuck to the rules then if that's the case. But you got to expect that there's going to be some sort of punishment. But he needs to take that and accept that as well. But the positive side for him is that despite that, he's had a good run the team, impressed in multiple different competitions and against much higher level opponents in Cove. So even if his season is cut short by a ban at some point kicking in, he still made big strides even since the mistake that he made. And see, yes, it might help his development if he goes to Euros, but I can't see him starting. I just think when Clark was actually interviewed about him, he was like, he's just a young boy. He's only made a handful of appearances, which a couple of weeks ago was true. So I don't think he sees him as someone who's going to be starting. So I don't think it's going to have a massive detrimental impact on his career. But at the same point, he needs to sort of, I just think the balance is that he's made a mistake. He's managed to benefit massively in the time in between, but you got to expect punishment at some point, and I think that has to be sort of taken at some point, I think, as well.
I think the Euros thing was, it would impact him, because, how often does Scotland get to a major tournament? A huge experience playing against players, and then I think there's probably between Liam Palmer and Stephen O'Donnell probably is the 2 right backs that will go. I think they might have went anyway, I'm not sure, but I think that if Patterson had played, if say James Tavernier isn't back until the final 3 or 4 games of the season, Patterson plays the rest, I think that he's definitely in with a shout. And it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. I mean, I am expecting them still to be banned. I don't expect. I don't know. I don't know if they maybe get it reduced, or I'm not sure what happened. And it was interesting to hear him say that there hasn't been a date set for the appeal, which is especially interesting when you consider who we drew in the next round. So obviously Rangers are going to draw. Will be welcoming Celtic in a fortnight, which is very interesting because from Celtic fans that I know, the mood from the Scottish Cup can save our season and let's give Scott Brown a send off quickly turned quite somber when they realised that they've seen Rangers so early in the competition. And I after that performance at the weekend, I think Rangers are going to show up and be serious, and they know that this is a cup competition. You want to go and win it. I think Celtic will be up against it. It's interesting. I think I read somewhere earlier that I don't think Rangers have beaten them at this stage of a Scottish Cup before, but I think we're firm favourites for it. I think they're nervous. I can't believe there's going to be another one from 2 weeks, but I look forward to it. Rangers will be up for it, and yes. What are your thoughts about welcoming Celtic to Ibrox in a fortnight?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a surprise. You just sort of expect these things to play out in semi-finals and finals, don't you? Like, and it gives an extra sort of buzz to this month. I think that would maybe be lacking otherwise. An extra like intensity to the preparations for Hibs at the weekend, and then rolling into the following week. So, I just think Rangers will really fancy themselves again. You know, the benefit of home advantage rather than playing a Hampden later on in the competition is something, you know, it's not to be sniffed at, even with the lack of fans, given the record that the Rangers have sort of put together there across the season. And it's just one of those ones where it comes at a decent time as well. I think, you know, Celtic still aren't they beat Falkirk in the third round, but I mean, it wasn't hugely impressive. There's still a lot of speculation. The Brown news is pretty raw. Speculation over managers, things swirling around the club, just uncertainty. Whereas Rangers are just so settled. And hopefully at that point, you're talking that if Tav's back running and things like that, it's 2 weeks away. It might be tight, but I mean, the band could play a role there because you really don't want to see Balogun playing right back in another Old Firm. I think that would be an issue. Obviously, Ryan Jack looks like it's highly unlikely that he's. But based on what McAllister saying, he was almost buying into the fact that it could be a race for him to be fit for Scotland, which is sort of pretty disastrous from Jack's point of view. But there will be sort of a few absences, but in general, Rangers should have a strong squad, be just so much more settled and confident coming into it. Do you not think?
I think it'd be hard to see past Rangers. I don't think any kind of neutral supporter would be saying otherwise. I think Celtic were, like I say, pinning a lot on this tournament and getting a bit of momentum and having like something to celebrate, but we could effectively end our season by mid-April, which is, I think, a daunting prospect for them. I think that Rangers need to feed into that fear when Celtic come to Ibrox. I think that we're in a very good nick at the minute, even with the injuries. You know, like Tavernier and Jack are big blows anyway. I think that Rangers' strongest 11 probably has them two in it. Definitely Tavernier, but probably Jack. And there'll be a big blow. And like, just touching on Jack, it's a big shame about that. And it's frustrating, you know, because his age, he's at 29, it keeps happening. And I just hope that they manage to get to the bottom of it and he gets a consistent run, because he has been a big player for us since Gerrard took over, and he's made huge strides since Gerrard took over. It'd be a shame for him not to have that influence for club and country because of a recurring injury. So hopefully he gets better. But yeah, as for the Celtic game, I mean, we have nothing to fear. I remember we did the preview before and I was talking, I wanted to scud them, but there was just so much emotion. You know what I mean? Coming out like after that Slavia match, that on reflection, a draw was probably a decent result for us. Even though I don't think either team particularly covered themselves in glory that game. I don't think it was a particularly good game. And I think there was very little enthusiasm in the build-up, which was so strange for an Old Firm match. But because this is ultimately, unless Rangers are still unbeaten by the second Ibrox Old Firm to come in the league, this is ultimately the only one that's going to really have a competitive edge. So it's going to be a big, big match. It's going to be a huge match, arguably the biggest of our season to come. Unless obviously, well, if we get through, then the cup final and stuff, or the cup semis and quarters and stuff would be bigger. But it's a huge match and it's the big one on the horizon. And I think this time is going to be a time when Rangers show up with intent. And honestly, I think that fear factor that they have for us, that's in their support, I think that it's in their team as well. And I think we can pick them off. I think we can seriously do them damage. And it probably hold off them making any announcement over a new manager or whatever, because it could be bad news for them. I think. I mean, I would say that, but I think I genuinely, I think Rangers will do it, and I think that we're in a good place, and I think that they'll struggle to deal with in that Scottish Cup clash. And that's not what's like going, like the confidence is based on our performances so far this season, and the atmosphere surrounding the fixture. More than it is just arrogance. I genuinely think Rangers are better than them, and they're in a better place. I think Celtic are wounded. I mean, I don't think they'll stay that way forever, but I think we can give them a wee kick whilst they're down, and I hope that we do. But we'll obviously go into that in more detail as it approaches. But the other big news, I think James, I think it was Daily Record, we're running an exclusive at Tavernier's in discussions over a new contract. It's interesting that all that's happening parallel to the emergence of Nathan Patterson. What's your thoughts on that and the comparison between the two pieces of news? Obviously, Tavernier's a huge player for us. He's in the running for Player of the Year. I think those first 3 or 4 months of the season probably edges him in front. But yeah, we've also got the emergence of young talent that we need to kind of harness and stuff. And if Tavernier is to sign a new contract, how do you kind of contrast the two situations?
Yeah, I think they can sort of continue. The two guys can continue in the squad together, but I think a second, like anything to do with Patterson, as much as he is the main guy for the academy, sort of the poster boy, a massive talent and all that. I think everything to do with him is secondary to have, given how important he is to the group, the starting 11, everything. The guy has just been unbelievable. And yeah, it's kind of weird. I think it's sort of fair enough, totally fair enough as well. Goldson's nearly played, well, he has played every minute so far this season. And Tav's been out for a little bit. So then you sort of lose touch with it, and maybe it becomes, oh yes, he's played less games. Goldson's been there for the whole time, but I mean, the form that guy was in earlier in the season was like scarcely believable. The amount of goals he's scoring, assists, clean sheets, everything. Just, and man of the matches, just consistently the best player on the pitch, no matter who the opposition was.
He was like the kind of ramp, that we went off. He set the tone for the entire season. It was, can you actually understate how valuable Tav's start to the season was in what we've achieved at this point on it? It was imperative. It was huge. It was massive. It was a leadership like kind of performance across those opening few months. And I agree with you. I think you can't understate it.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And so if he is happy to stay on and having won the title, I think there's been stuff coming out before about how happy he is living in Glasgow and all that. We've obviously said before on here that it wouldn't be a major surprise if a Premier League team was interested, if he was interested in proving himself back down there. But if he's happy to stay, they need to, cover this contract and whatever he wants to put on it and give it to him. Like it would be brilliant if he could stay on, because I think there's been some sort of doubts that way, and that's only natural when a guy's achieved that much and been so successful, so impressive, and dominating headlines for months. Not just getting recognition in Europe and stuff as well, and because of the records and stuff he's breaking from right back. So keeping him on is paramount, above anything to do with Patterson, in my opinion. But I also think as sort of time comes on, or time goes on, there can be a bit more of a blend between how you use them. So this season, it was essentially just, if if Tav is fit, he plays, and that's totally justified. What we've seen now is a bit more proof that Patterson really can handle it at all levels. So it could be a case where you start moving into almost like the relationship between a number one and number two keeper. Patterson plays all the cup games. That's just sort of a given. Plays maybe some Europa League qualifiers if they go back to two legs, and the results already in the bag, or Champions League qualifiers, and just things like that. Gets a game every month in the league, something like that. Whereas at the minute, or so far previously, it had been just Tav. But I also think Patterson will be very aware of the fact that he's very much still the apprentice. It's just the fact that Tav's been injured. He's still a really young guy with a long-term contract, and I think he'll also be, he won't be too disgruntled playing second fiddle to a guy who is clearly, a very, very good player. So I think, keeping them both on is key, but Tav is just key to everything going forward. I think absolutely vital. And the fact that the age is as well means that it doesn't necessarily need to end anytime soon if he's happy. It's a well off the conversation of, is he nearly done or not? It's not even really a factor.
I think his brother said that he would stay in Glasgow for the rest of his career. So, I mean, I wouldn't be against that either. And I would foresee that kind of reserve goalkeeper thing, like you say, Patterson getting more game time and not less important games, but games that Rangers really should be winning. But yeah, it's a good dilemma to have, having the both of them in it. And I hope that Tavernier's back before long. Like you say, he's back in the grass, so he surely will make a return before the end of the season. I think it's a question of when rather than if. But let's see how it goes. As for Rangers news, is there anything else that's happened this week that's piqued your interest? Or?
I think maybe the one, just now we're thinking of fullbacks and stuff, James Maxwell scoring in that game last night against Hibs. He's had a cracking season at Queen of the South, so I think that'll be interesting to see how Rangers play that next year. Similar age to Patterson, and I think stuff coming out from the academy before. I think it was Craig Mulholland or Graham Murray, one of the two, talking about him previously, saying that he's a bit of a late developer. So I think he was brought in from elsewhere, but he really wasn't seen as this next greatest thing until a couple of years ago, when people were like, actually, he really has a lot of talent, or he's really kicked on a lot in terms of the age group stuff. But he's played every week. I think one thing with the loanees is that a lot of time when people go out on stints, there's high expectations. The clubs are delighted to bring them in, and then it doesn't really happen for one reason or another, or can't really nail down a spot in the team. I think over the last few years, there's been very few people who start every week, and he started every week in that team for the entire season. That's 4 or 5 goals I think he scored, a few assists in there as well. So he likes to get forward, which suits the model well. And I just think it'll be interesting to see what happens with him next year, whether it's a Stephen Kelly does well in the Championship, then has to have a go in the Premiership. But with Bassey also there, Barisic, and a lot of speculation about him, I'm not sure there's enough in Bassey and Maxwell to be like, if Barisic goes, we don't replace him. But it'll be interesting to see sort of what priority and what reward he's given for doing really, really well this season. But that's the one thing that's maybe just jumped out the last couple of days.
I think they've got loads of Rangers players, don't they? Yeah,
4, Mabude, Dixon, and Reece Breen. But I think Breen is out of contract at the end of the season. Dixon's on a lot. He signed an extension after he making his debut, and then Mabude is going to go as well, I think.
I think it was interesting when you were talking about Maxwell as well, because I might be wrong. I'm sure he signed a contract at the same time as Patterson, perhaps, I don't know, a couple of seasons ago, when he was high, and they were pointing him out as being highly rated. And it's interesting that he's doing so well there, because, I mean, again, it'd be interesting if Rangers had a kind of homegrown left and right backs, these assets that come through the academy for something that's criminally underperformed, I think, in the eyes of Rangers fans, and maybe have a golden generation of Rangers players and influential players that came through the academy. I think that would be a dream for a lot of Rangers fans, and I think there is a lot of talent in the Rangers academy. Like Kai Kennedy's another one who continues to catch the eye. Signed a 2-year contract at Rangers. Perhaps he will be involved next season, but maybe that might be the same as Maxwell. Maybe he'll get a Premiership loan move first. But there's a lot of young talent floating about Rangers, and hope it'd be good to see a lot of it break through. It'd be very, very exciting if we had a team made up of like kind of boys from the academy. I think that would be great to see, but there's a long way to go before anything like that happens yet. But yeah, I think that's us for this week. And we'll look forward to the match against Hibs at the weekend. I'm sure that we'll do a preview for that as well. But if you enjoyed this video, please click like, please click subscribe, please leave a comment below and join in the conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. And enjoy the rest of your week.